I recreated Megadeth's Foreclosure of a Dream. Let's take a listen.
Those visions never seen until all is lost. Personal holocaust, foreclosure of a dream.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel Make the Music, and in this video I'm going to break down how I got the sound for Foreclosure of a Dream by Megadeth. I'm basing the sound off their 2012 remaster. I think that's the best sounding version of Countdown to Extinction. And if you like videos like this, you should subscribe to the channel and like the video down below. I also have a ton of free material that you can find in the description box down below, including the stems to the song. So if you want to listen to the individual stems that I created, go ahead, I'll send those to you for free. And I've got a bunch of other great free material on the site as well. Let's go ahead and dive into the session and see how I recreated this sound from this thrash classic. Okay, I'm going to get into the session here. I always like to start with the master bus chain. What am I doing? I'm using Virtual Mix Rack. I wanted analog sound. This was recorded in the early 90s. I added a bit of top end, some revival for shimmer and thickness, and use Virtual Mix Bus with the E channel. That's pretty standard for me. EQ wise, I needed some top, needed some low, needed to feel it's kind of more of a scooped sounding album. So that's one change I made there. SSL compressor. This is doing about 4 dB of gain reduction here. If you're not using master bus compression, you should start now. I got a ton of videos on how I do that. Toneforge DI match and Ozone to just match the EQ and width of the original track. I've got videos on how I use those plugins. Again, scooping out some low mids again, then using a limiter to cap it off and give it the right loudness. I also find those are good to clamp down on drum sounds that maybe get a little too pokey. So that's the master bus chain there. Superior Drummer 3 is what I'm using for drums. This was the Metal EZX, and basically everything is the big crack kick stock, except I'm using a few samples. So I have a kick sample, a snare sample. For the snare, I believe I'm using snare 1, big crack. And then for the kick, I'm using the big crack as well. So basically, it's just the big crack EZX with a few samples included there. It's pretty freaking heavy sounding, if you ask me. No processing in Superior Drummer. I did do a bit of processing on the kick and snare and the DAW. Virtual Mix Rack, adding some top, getting rid of some low information there, adding some compression as well. EQ, the kick needed a lot of like mid-range stuff, and then transient shaper to give it a little more attack and sustain. So all the plugins off sound like this with that kick drum. So a lot of smack being added, you could say. Snare, using just a little EQ, taking out a little top. So nothing crazy there. The drums overall have Virtual Mix Rack on them. I'm adding some shimmer and thickness compression mostly to the drums. You can see it's really not doing much. Soft clip, this is great. So if you're not clipping your drums, if you really want the drums to be loud, you don't want them to be too peaky or pokey, using soft clip can help just shave off those transients while not using compression or something. But overall brings up the loudness of the entire kit. And a little EQ, I'm taking out a little top end. So if I take out all the plugins, so the kit sounded good. I just enhanced it a little bit with a little EQ and compression. Nothing too crazy there. Now let's get into the Dave Ellefson bass sound. This is a famous bass sound of metal and thrash. I've got a DI going on. And then I'm using an amp track as well. Bias FX2, I'm using the Blue Line version 2. You can see my settings here, pretty scooped overall. A little compression on the way in. The cab is just with the 57 mic'd up there. So the compression settings had a lot of blend, not a lot of attack, and just adding some sustain to the bass to keep it not so transient, but really have the notes hold out, adding a lot of low end as well. So those two signals combine to create this. Where the magic happens, though, is kind of the processing. So stock Reaper EQ, getting rid of some like 400 information, but adding some low back in. I'm high passing at 50. I'm low passing at 17K, and then adding some upper mid information to get that bass guitar to poke out really amongst all the guitars and heavy production. You can hear that on the album. Lots of top. You can see with the SSL channel in the Virtual Mix Rack. I'm also using the virtual channel, driving it a little bit. Then using the 1176 compressor. Yeah, I could use the CLA 76, but this is basically the same thing. So quite a bit of compression, but I'm really coming in heavy with the limiter. Another great purpose of using a limiter on bass is to really give these notes sustain. So listen to these notes here, especially in the intro. If I take the plugins off, you notice it would kind of die out. Just not as much attack or beefiness. So compressing, using a good amp track, and then adding tons of top end and low end to get your bass to kind of peak out of the mix is what the key is to a David Ellefson Megadeth bass sound and a thrash metal bass sound. So that's what I did there. For rhythm guitars, they sound like this. Super heavy guitar sound. I absolutely love it. For the guitar track, I'm using an amp match Countdown to Extinction by SFX2. I've done a video on Countdown to Extinction amp match. Just a little boost in front of it, but it is matched to a stem to get that sound there. But it doesn't mean it didn't need some processing. So without the processing, it sounds like this. Pretty good, but not quite there. I'm using stock EQ, need a lot of top end, so 5, 7, 8K, and some like that 200 woofiness to go away. SSL channel, not doing a ton here, just adding a little bit of mid-range here. And there's no real compression. I did a lot of the work with this stock EQ. And I'm adding lustrous plates. If you listen to the stems from Countdown to Extinction, any of the guitar stems is a little bit of a plate, adding some ambience to the guitars, not making it feel so dry. So that's a really good tip. If you're mixing heavy guitars or something, just using a slightly ambient plate, not anything too crazy. You don't want to make it sound washy, but you want to give the guitars a space so they don't feel so digital in your face, especially when I'm using something like an amp sim. A slight chamber just kind of softens some of the frequencies, some of the transients, gives it a bit of a space. I use the chrome plate with the lustrous plate. So that sounded like this. Let's get into the clean guitars. There's actually acoustics and cleans in that intro if you listen real carefully. I'm using Slate's Overloud for that. The Soldano, I was just trying to get a specific clean sound. So I just threw that on there real quick. The key was really the EQ. It's SSL channel. It needed a lot of everything. Apparently I added almost everything there. A lot of compression as well. EQ, more top end. So taking out some lows, adding more top. So if I take all the processing off, it really didn't, all that low information didn't need to be there. That was kind of getting taken up by the acoustics actually. And then the same plate I used on the guitars. And then the lead guitars are the same amp patch is what I used for the rhythms. They have a couple different parts. It's double track, just slightly panned right and left. A little EQ, adding some top to get it to poke through, and then that same plate on them. That EQ is really adding a lot of clarity there. Now we finally get to the acoustics, which sound like this. Really difficult part to track. This took me a lot of takes to get. I don't even feel like it's perfect still, but it works in the track. Such an amazing part though. I love that acoustic guitar part. Virtual mix rack, we needed to darken the tone. All my acoustics were way too thin. The acoustics are super woody and meaty on the original track. So I used the Neumann emulation, then added top end back in. Use the shimmer control a lot. So if I take all the plugins off, that's making it sound a little more natural. LA. Love it on acoustic guitars. My go-to every time, basically. Just helps the acoustic guitar from sounding, you know, like it's played inconsistently. It's in the back. It just goes, it pushes it to the front. So it does a great job of that. Added the same plate of reverb as well to give it a space. That intro sounds like this. Now we get to the vocal. Let's break down the Dave Mustaine vocal sound, especially on this Countdown to Extinction album. Basically all single track. Dave's not known to do tons of layering. He does now, maybe on the more modern records, but single or double track, like the chorus is double tracked here as well. But let's play some of the vocals soloed.
Rise so high, it's so far to fall. Rise so high, it's so far to fall. A planet dignity and balance for all.
Really, I wanted to get this vocal super aggressive, in your face, but also have a space in the mix as well, so it wasn't super dry. So I tracked with a little bit of stock reverb compression. I will mention that virtual channel really pushed the drive. The vocal, when I didn't have enough distortion on it, it just sounded not aggressive enough. And Dave's just a really aggressive vocalist. I did my best here with this track, but really needed to push that for the aggressiveness.
Rise so high,
You can even hear in the the chorus part here.
perspective is lost in the spirit of a chase. Foreclosure of a
I'm
dream.
using the distressor to do more compression, the 1176 to bring in more compression. You can see I'm using the SSL channel style EQ to push a ton of top end, right? Just get it super, super bright because I'm using the Neumann mic emulation and the 1073 sort of preamp there. So, and the revival to add more shimmer. So aggressive, bright, but with body was the key with the vocal sound. I'm using Relimit, not using L2. I just decided to use Relimit this time.
Perspective is lost in the spirit of a chase. Foreclosure of a dream.
I just wanted it sounding super transparent. Not a lot of plugins. De-esser, CLA Epic, I tinkered with this for a while to get a nice mix of reverb and delay, and it really makes a big difference with the vocal.
Perspective is lost in the spirit of a chase. Foreclosure of a dream.
To make it sound big, I'm using Valhalla Supermassive, just coming in with a little more reverb after that.
Perspective is lost in the spirit of a chase. Foreclosure of a dream. Backed in a corner, caught up in the race. A means to an end.
So if I take all the vocal plugins off, it sounds like this.
Backed in a corner, caught up in the race. A means to an end, it in disgrace.
Add it all back on.
Backed in a corner, caught up in the race.
Distortion, compression, some EQ to get it bright, and limiting just puts it in the perfect spot. And then there's a little meta tune just to add some width to the track. So in the track, it sounds like this.
Backed in a corner, caught up in the race. A means to an end, it in disgrace. Perspective is lost in the spirit of a chase. Foreclosure of a dream.
There you go. That is the Megadeth Countdown to Extinction Foreclosure of a Dream sound. Let me know in a comment, how well did I do on this video? This was a trickier one than I thought, getting all the sounds figured out, but it was a really big fun one. Big fan of Megadeth, obviously, so I love doing these. Leave a comment down below, like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you'd like to see any other Match the Song sounds, you'd like to see me give an attempt at any of them. Leave it in a comment. I'd love to check that out. I always love trying to match new sounds and give myself a new challenge. But anyways, like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Let's do a full playthrough of this track.